Every personality type has weaknesses, and INFJs are no exception. Let's take a look at 2 INFJ vices on today's show. I do 2 things on a regular basis that really bother my wife. The first is that I manipulate her, and the second is that I have a tendency to climb up on a soapbox and talk for an extended period of time about a topic that I'm really passionate about. When I manipulate her, I take 2 different approaches. First, I talk about what I want to do or what I want her to do from a bunch of different angles and perspectives, trying to convince her of all the different sides. And then I appeal to her emotions. I consider what's important to her and what she might worry about, and then I try to pull on that. I know, selfish, right? But it's the tendency that I have, and sometimes I just flat out whine, to be honest. It's probably no surprise to you who've thought a lot about the INFJ dominant function or main mindset, introverted intuition, that we take the perspectives approach, or that I take the perspectives approach, talking about a bunch of different angles. It's just what introverted intuition does. Like a jeweler would take a fine diamond and turn it over looking at the various different facets. That's how we tend to approach the world, so that we can take all the different pieces, find a pattern, and see the big picture all together. So when we persuade others, we like to look at the different perspectives, and we may consider in particular what perspective the person to whom we're talking comes from, and try to appeal to that one particular perspective to persuade them to do what we want, or rather to manipulate them to do what we want. And then we appeal to emotions because our second function, our auxiliary function, is extroverted feeling. So we lean into extroverted feeling because it's more natural to us. It's the number one way that we make decisions, or the most comfortable way we make decisions. So, for example, we may remind other people of a social obligation that they have, or how much we've given to them, so that they'll remember that they should probably give back to keep the relationship balanced. For example, the other night I was doing the dishes and my wife told me she was going to bed, and I just started complaining, "Oh, I've done all these dishes so that we could be together, and now you're just going to go to bed." I know, really great seeing all the junk that's really part of my life. But it's just a natural tendency and a route that I tend to go, because I want to play on that relationship and what she should give in my mind at that moment. And I must add that just because it's natural, it doesn't mean it's good or right or appropriate. So it's not something I want to keep doing. It's something that I want to change, and I think something that we should work on as INFJs. And also, I mentioned that extroverted feeling, appealing to emotions, comes naturally, but I want to include that a logical appeal is also something that we can be good at. And just because we make decisions with what is of high importance to us and really valuable to us, a high ideal or value, it doesn't mean that we don't appeal to logic or weigh logic, because we certainly do that as well. Moving back to the soapbox tendency or vice, it's something that we tend to do when we believe deeply in a value or ideal, and we've molded over, and maybe we've thought a lot about something that bothers us. And when we find a sympathetic ear, someone that we have a close relationship with, particularly a family member or a really close friend, it's not unusual for us to go on for an extended period of time, maybe even sermonizing about this particular topic, talking so long that the person we're talking to, their eyes start to glaze over. This happens all the time with my wife. She'll at first be trying to listen and be sincerely interested, but after a while, she'll just get this glazed over look on her face, and you can tell that she's mentally checked out. She's still there because she knows she wants to try to love me and adhere to her wifely duties because she's an ISTJ, but she's not there anymore, and I know that I've lost her, but I still have a lot more to say, and it just goes on and on. I mean, I even do this with my son, who's like 3 years old sometimes, and the poor kid is listening to stuff that's way over his head, and I should really tone it down and make it a ton shorter. My wife has to kind of translate for me sometimes and just cut it short. But it's something that we tend to do. And this happens between INFJs too. I mean, I know other INFJs who will get on a topic that they're passionate about and just start talking at length. And it might not be a topic that the other INFJ is passionate about. Like when I've met with other people who are INFJs, they go on at length. And if I'm not super interested in it, I try my hardest to listen, but if I don't have enough background knowledge, or if I don't share the interest or the passion, I can find myself checking out as well. I think that is just part of being human and lacking a common interest in something. But this is the way that the soapbox tends to go. We have a tendency to do this soapbox the best that I can understand it, because we like to mull deep things over and look at the different angles, like I mentioned earlier, of that introverted intuition, collect and gather and sort through all kinds of information, trying to piece it together. And when we think about something that really bothers us with those tightly held values or ideals, going back to the extroverted feeling, we put all this information together. Sometimes we feel we just need to share it with someone else, either to process through it or to almost rail against that thing that really bothers us, or to push ahead with what's really important to us. And I just want to clarify, this soapbox usually isn't about a passion, like an interest that, or a hobby that you love necessarily, because we can go on at length about that. But usually it's about something that really bothers you or that you'd like to change in the world. And you sermonize again, you go on and on about this particular topic. So when you finally get a sympathetic ear as an extroverted feeler, like all extroverted feelers, we tend to work things out by talking them out loud, or thinking them out loud, or maybe even praying them out loud. But we need to bounce them off of other people. So when we've collected so much information as introverts, kind of kept it to ourselves for a long time, because we tend to listen to people that we don't go as deep with, we finally get a chance to share with those who are really close to us. And then we just spew all that information out at once, because we're not sure maybe when we're going to get another chance to talk. And it's way too much. It can be like drinking from a fire hydrant for that other person and totally be overwhelming. And that's not necessarily a good thing. In fact, it's often a bad thing, especially if the information we're sharing isn't helpful to the other person. So before I leave dumping these INFJ vices on you, I want to give you some good news. I was reading a parenting book from the Parenting is Heart Work group the other day, and I was looking at a page where they talked about behaviors and characteristics that different personalities or different children exhibit. And I think this is true of all people, but they were showing different characteristics like leadership and creativity. And then they were showing the positive side, like those two things, and then the negative side. And on a spectrum, you could see both ends. So the good news is, if there's a negative side, these behaviors or tendencies also have a positive side that we can aim for. So when it comes to manipulating, it means that the person who manipulates probably is very good at persuading. And that could be a positive thing, as you might imagine. The goal is that we'd actually want to do the persuading for other people's good. And then if you're thinking about the soapbox, there are probably times where you need to share information that includes a lot of different angles and that you spend a lot of time thinking about, and that's important, with other people in a way that would benefit them, and that goes on at length. That's a valuable skill to have, but it's just when and why you use it. So here are a few things to keep in mind as you fight these tendencies, if you find that there are challenges for you in your life that I've been trying to think through that might also be of service to you. The first one is just to be aware. A lot of people aren't even aware that they have a problem. So knowing that this might be a negative tendency for you, or a challenge, or a proclivity that you have that you need to fight back against, is a good place to start, because some people aren't even aware. Another thing to keep in mind is that when other people give you feedback about things you're doing that bother them, and you hear it from someone you really care about, that knows you well, that you trust, or several people that you might work with on a regular basis, it's important to heed that feedback, which you may already do. But if you haven't yet, just thinking about that and taking it to mind, or taking it into consideration rather, is a great step forward, because until you accept it and take responsibility for it, you can't do anything to change it. And it's only going to be a continual obstacle unless you do something about it. And last and most important, keep in mind this question: is it helpful for the other person, and is it beneficial to me? If you can answer no to either one of those parts of the question, it's probably not worth doing. If you are trying to persuade someone and you're doing something that's not for their good, or something that isn't going to be beneficial to you, the end that you're trying to achieve, then it's probably not a good kind of persuading. It's probably leaning toward manipulation, and timing is a factor in that as well. If you're sharing some information for what you think is another person's benefit, but it's not something that they really need to hear, and they're not the right person to listen, then it probably isn't for their good. And if it's not good for you to go on and on about a topic, like if you do it all the time, which I, again, am guilty of doing from time to time for sure, or maybe more from time to time than I think of, then it's probably not beneficial for me as well, or beneficial for you either. So just thinking about that again, is it helpful for the other person? Is it beneficial for you? Is a nice grid to work through. And of course, this is a tall task. These are things that you'll probably wrestle with your whole life, but thinking about them can do great things for you and for your relationships. Thanks so much for tuning into the show today. I hope that you found it helpful. If you're just starting to explore your INFJ personality and you'd like to learn more about it, especially if maybe you didn't quite understand that introverted intuition terminology or that extroverted feeling terminology, or you just like some new perspectives, then I'd love to give you a free copy of my book, The INFJ Personality Guide. The book delves into the different mindsets and motivations that cause you to do what you do as an INFJ, as well as some common challenges and solutions to those challenges when it comes to things INFJs face in the world. And ultimately, I hope that you come away with the understanding that you're not messed up or broken, but just different, and you have valuable gifts and ideas and insights that the world needs to hear. You can grab a copy of the book one of two ways. First, consider texting the letters INFJ to the number 444-999, or alternatively, you can visit ispeakpeople.com/INFJ-personality-guide to grab a copy there. Thanks so much for watching the show today. It was a pleasure hanging out with you. If this is your first time watching, I'd encourage you to hit that subscribe button. There will be new shows coming out on a regular basis. And if you want to learn more about your personality type, this is a great place to do it. Love to see you be part of this community. If you're a regular subscriber, thanks again for watching. I look forward to seeing you on the next video.